So hello everybody, welcome back to the security stream of the GSE Virtual Conference 2023. This is the third session in the security stream of the day, and in a moment Hans will take us through the zSecure update. So just before we get there, a couple of things. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to pop them in the chat. However silly the questions might sound, there's no such thing as a silly question, so pop them in the chat. Lines, you can unmute yourself, by the way, so if you want to throw a question at Hans, then we might ask you to just unmute your line, but you can do that. This is session 7C for the purpose of feedback, by the way. If you've been attending previous sessions this morning, don't forget to leave your feedback. The website's working fine now. We'll put a link for Hans' session for this to take his feedback towards the end of his session. I want to say one important thing about feedback, that if you're collecting CPE or CPD points because you've got certifications, you're maintaining an education portfolio, and you need evidence that you've attended any of the GSE sessions, by completing the session feedback contributes towards your CPD points, and you will be able to download a certificate from the GSE website with the evidence that you attended these sessions. But right now I'm going to hand over to Hans Skerner from IBM Security. So he's from the zSecure development team, and I'll let Hans introduce himself in a moment, but Hans is by no means a stranger to GSE. He's presented to us a few times before. So Hans, welcome back, sir, and look forward to your zSecure update.
Yeah, thank you. So I hope all can hear me well. I'll be shifting around a bit as the sun shines in my eyes. I'll be moving around a bit, but okay. Today I thought I'll just talk about the software update that's coming out, this week or next week, something like that. The APR number is here in the screen. We call it the Service Stream Enhancement, SSE, and basically it's the February 23 SSE. Of course, there's actually more than one APR number because there's several software pieces involved, but this is the main one. So what is the interesting thing about this SSE? Well, actually, it's the biggest one we have shipped so far. We're a little bit worried whether the systems will survive us shipping that big a PTF. That's why it's taking some time. One of the main things is the stick version 8 support. And then there's a lot of stuff for ACF2 customers, automation of compliance checks. Then we have several enhancements to the access monitor feature, and then some alert features, command verifier, and SMF enhancements. So that's what we'll be talking about. I'll go most deep into the stick version 8 support. And that's part of the compliance framework. So to support the version 8, we decided to extend Carla to make it easier to work with multiple versions and multiple standards, and that holds for both the Security and Compliance Center and zSecure Audit. The compliance framework is part of both products. One of the things we did was we aligned the terminology to align more with the zSSE dashboard, which came kind of from cross-platform dashboard. So in terminology, what we called in Carla in the past the rule set, we now call a control. And what we call the tests, we now call a goal. So syntactically, they're almost, aliases. But also, all the places where we show these things, we try to align with the terminology in a dashboard so that you see less confusing differences between ISPF and the dashboard. Then we added some new statements to help with maintaining the compliance things. One of the big problems is actually maintaining the compliance tests for a stick. As you may know, there's a new stick issued by DISA, Defense Information Security Agency of the American Department of Defense. Every quarter they bring out a new release, if you will, of the standard, which usually does not change that much. It's all incremental changes. And actually it's all for at least 50% is changes that we ourselves suggested that they improve in the stick. So we get customer complaints, and when we automate stuff, we also see things that could have been formulated more clearly, and we try to get this out to enhance these standards. That's it's a lot of work, but it works, and yeah, there's a new one every quarter. So we want to make it easier to support the specific version and also to support multiple versions. So to that end, we added some statements to the Carla auditing and reporting language. We now have a def standard where we define a standard. We have a def ref for references. We have a limit standard to limit the output to just one standard or one version. We have the control, which used to be a rule set. Then we have in the controls, we have goals, and the controls now ended with an end control. And there's also another statement, apply control, to actually include existing controls in your own standards. So we have made it easier to share specific goals between multiple standards so that you only have to write the Carla once. And that holds both for us, that we make our own life as developers easy, but also for people who want to make a side standard that exploits a number of things from the stick, but not everything. And then the ones that can be used unmodified, those you could easily embed with apply control. Other features are around the compliance checking. So now for the BMC products, we had added support to show all the security relevant settings for Control M, Control D, Control O. That's now automated. You used to have to give a simulate command. That's no longer necessary. And there's some new DB2 security parameters you could write compliance checks for. Back to the standard. So I'll go into some detail here to try to explain why it's interesting that we have those new things. So we now have the dev standard statement with a standard name and a list of versions. I'll come back to that. You can define multiple standards. So one of the things that we used to have is that we had we swiped the products, ZOS product sticks and the ZOS operating system stick together in the previous versions of zSecure, and now they are split, which kind of necessitated because the version 8 only applies to ZOS. The product sticks are still at various version 6 levels. Then we have so the standard name is used in the rules, and we kind of have the dev standard names for two purposes. One, to make sure that we don't make typos, and secondly, that we define which versions exist of a certain standard. And I'll come to that, why that's interesting. So there's a new member in zSecure audit now that says which standards the Carla supports in this version of the program, and that's the @std member, zSecure Carla DD dev. So that's a piece of Carla that has the dev standard statements that we support, and that will be shown in the SPF interface. So here's an example of such a standard. Here we have the RACF prods stick, and the version we have called here latest. So we have in the product sticks, we don't yet have every individual version 6 number because the different products have a different level, which makes life difficult to display a version. So we have kind of summarized this as one bigger standards, all the product sticks together with the latest thing. And then we have the RACF ZOS sticks. So we see the naming of the standards. We now start with the ESM, and then we say prods or ZOS, and then stick. And then we support 6.43 and 8.10 in this this SSE will ship those two levels. Then another new statement is the devref, where we define a reference name, the same purpose in a way to ensure you don't make typing mistakes. So in the controls themselves, you can refer those to things, and those things you can refer to, need to be defined with devref. There are some predefined ones. That's the add_ref member in the Carla library. And the ones we do predefine are vulID, which is the vulnerability identifier used by the Secure Technical Implementation Guide. The CCI, the control correlation identifier, that kind of links the rule to a more general rule, basically. And then we have the VMS, this vulnerability management system identifier, which has not that much use outside of the government, I think. But the other ones are easy to find on the internet. And then we have the stick ID, the stick control name. Now that's almost the same as the control name itself, but there's some small differences. Sometimes for technical reasons, we need to have multiple rule sets for one control, and that's where the stick ID makes it handy to say, okay, well, actually it's the same stick ID. So syntactically, there's now the control statement, and what's new is that, so it used to be rule set, and then there used to be one rule set name. There's now a list, so it now starts with a parenthesis, and then you can get one or more control names. So you can have multiple control names referring to the same stuff that comes after it. So that would be the next to the control name, you give the standard name and the version, optional version. No, not optional, the version specification, optional overrides, and optional references. So that's the most important thing, the control name within a certain standard and version. Why did we need to do this? Because, well, with the stick, when they went from version 6 to version 8, they gave every control a new name in the ZOS standard. But the actual what they checked didn't change. So we wanted to share the Carla of the goals, the tests between the versions, even though they have a different name now. If you don't say anything, then the default description, sort key, captions, and severity will be used, but you can override them. So that happens with the stick too. So with the version 6 name, it had a certain description. With the version 8 name, they made the description a lot more specific. And that was one of the things that we prompted them to do, so that now biting us in the back, you could say. But they made it more specific to what they are actually checking, rather than some very wide idea of which what they were checking was they were only checking one instance of what the description was. And we kind of objected to that, saying you should give the controller name relating to what it is actually checking and not everything else, because that's just very confusing. And a new thing also is that the control statement needs to be terminated with an end control statement. Now about the versions. So that's where it gets interesting. So you could apply the standard to a single version, or you can give a list of versions separated by commas, or you could give a version range with a colon, or you can use an open-ended version range. And that's the one we exploit a lot, because there it says, well, starting 8.1, it's called this way. The control name has a new name in version 8, but it will keep that name for the foreseeable future. And they bring out 4 releases a year, so we're already at version 10 now. But yeah, so that means that not every quarter we would have to update this Carla member. So that's the main thing. We only have to change the STD member to say, well, there's a new instance and we checked everything that's still the same. And the ones that are changed, we would write new Carla for the new version, of course. But the ones that are not the same, which is the bulk of the controls, we now have to do a lot less edit work to support those. Then the next piece in the compliance framework is defining domains. So domains is about defining which objects your goals should apply to. So the domain, you can give a name and a description and so on. But the most important part of it is the select statement, where you select the object type and a selection clause. To pop up in the report, it must be a non-empty collection of objects. So if you ask for object level goal details or check results, then you won't see anything if the domain is empty. So as a general design guideline, you should make sure that the domain is not empty. And to achieve that, you could use the summary statement where you could have a counter. And the counter could be 0, potentially, at least if there are more object types. Well, within the standard and within the control, you can have multiple domains. But yeah, the language concept that refers to domain is a rule. And in a rule, you can actually also merge two domains, but I'll not go into that in this presentation. So following the domain, after you have declared this domain name, you can use it. So then we go there, rule. So the rule refers to a domain. But you can have some exceptions here. That's what they call exempt. So it sometimes gets a bit confusing in the sense that there are exemptions, there are suppressions, and there are overrides. What's the difference? Well, the exempt is an exception for a specific object within the domain. Suppression is about the whole rules or whole controls you want to report as suppressed. And an override is a local override of a result for a specific object. So the rule, between the rule and the end rule statement, you have multiple goals. And the goals are tested against the domain you specify in the rule. And there's a default severity. We distinguish, there's always a discussion, how many severity levels do you want to support? We chose 3 because that's what the zSecure also does. There's now some other standards coming up that want to distinguish 4 severities. But for now, we'll keep it at 3. And yeah, so the 4th level would be critical, it's above high. But for the moment, we keep it at the 3 levels. Then we have the goal statement. There you say, okay, what do I want to test? You refer to the object, the new list type in the domain. That must be one of the domains in the rule. And then you say, typically you say field name equals field value, or maybe exists field value, or missing field value, or you can say just test whether there's a specific count in a new list type. Now you can, in a goal, declare saying it's compliant, or it is non-compliant, or it is not applicable if this is true, or it's undecided. So typically, if software is not installed, then the rule would be not applicable. And if it needs to be asserted, then it typically would be undecided. If it's organizational control, for instance, or if we cannot figure out it in an automated manner, you would initially see undecided. And then we have the goal test outcome. It can be reversed with a non-compliant keyword, or you can say it's not applicable. And the goals can be nested. So if otherwise, you can say, well, if this is not true, then test that. And if that's not true, test that, and so on and so on. Then you're compliant when the final conclusion is compliant, and when that holds for all goals in the rule. Now here, let's look at an example. I took a real life example, so that's the version 8 rule RACF ES90. There you say control, parenthesis open, that starts the list of control names. And there's in this example just one control name, it's RACF ES90. It's part of the standard called RACF underscore ZOS underscore stick, and it's just for version 8.9. And there's a list of references to the stick ID, the vulnerability ID, the VMS, and the CCI. And then a description, a caption. Caption is a max 25 character short description that you can exploit to make printable reports palatable, and the severity. Then we have a domain. Well, in this case, we say select new list type class, and the selection clause is class equals facility. So we just look for one record per system with the class facility one, just the definition of the class. And then we see a summary summarized by class complex system and version. So the last three complex system version basically counts it per system. Now we have a rule that points to this domain we just defined, domain facility class. And then within the rule, before the end rule, we have a goal. And one is the class must be active. And we call the goal 1.facility underscore active. So typically we try to organize the goal names in such a way that they coincide with the list in the standard. So if the list in the standard has 1.a, 1.b, then you would see that in the name we give. So there's a 1 and then facility active. And that checks that active equals yes for the class. Is that the only thing? No, there's another one. It must not only be active, but it also must have generic checking active. So that's what the stick control says. And we check that second goal too, and that's the whole rule. So I hope this helped a bit to understand what might look to you as complex sets of Carla in those controls, but actually most of the characters are description and captions and stuff. The basic logic is not that difficult. Now in this way, so I said it was a real life control, but it's no longer because it actually has a colon behind the version number. So it should have said 8.9 colon or 8.10 colon. That's actually what's in the SSE. Onto the user interface. So in the AU.R in the ISPF interface, we have the rule evaluation menu, and it has an option C to configure rules and assertions. So there's a number of things that need to be configured, like naming. So the domain assertions, kind of what data set name patterns are used for your install data sets for a specific product. That's an example of a typical domain assertion. So the stick requires you to verify the protection of your install data sets where the source code resides, of, for instance, your exits, or whether the software source libraries are. Yeah, so that needs to be asserted with a domain assertion where that is, what is the dataset name pattern. And we have the E for evaluate compliance. And you can evaluate the compliance to multiple standards and multiple versions at the same time. We have the option H to look in the history log of the assertions, the sensitive resource configurations, and option S to zoom in basically through subsets of rules. Or if you can't remember what the rule name was, then S is the easiest way to zoom in through the category to a specific control. And then we have T for testing. That's mainly used if you write your own rules it's very handy to just run that one rule. So the user interface now allows you to select both the version 6 and the version 8 standard of the ZOS stick, and then the ZOS product stick is now a separate checkbox. So that's what has changed here. And another new tag is the compliance result selection. Used to just have compliant, non-compliant overridden. There's now also an unknown option to only zoom into the things that are unknown yet and probably need assertions. You could also have used assertions due in a number of days, but unknown gives you possibly slightly more and is easier to type. Next, an example of the S option, the subset. So this is the new subset for version 8. So you see that they have totally renamed those categories. They start with the external security monitor dash and then a 2-character abbreviation for the area. So that 2-character abbreviation was also somewhere in the old stick control names, often as the second and third character. So it used to be ICA for IBM certificate, and then now is RACF-CE. And of course, this same thing is there for ACF2. I just showed you the RACF categories. Another new feature is assertions. Extending assertions. So that's actually a request for enhancements we got from several users. They would say, well, I'd like to do this assertion, but I would love to do it only once and say it applies to all my systems. So here's the choice. So the scope of the assertion is now a new area here, and you can say, well, it applies only to this system. That's the normal one, you would say, but you can also say apply to all systems with the same security database. So if it's about something RACF or ACF2, then the logical thing would be to say it applies to the whole complex. Or you could say it applies even cross-complex. So if it's more organizational-like, then you can say, well, I do have a procedure and it applies to all my systems and all my security databases. So you could select 3 here. You can also extend the scope in a different way. You say, well, I don't want to do it just for this object class, but also for, well, actually for all object classes used by this standard. So you could have standards, for instance, for CICS resources, where every CICS region have a different class. So you could say I want to assert it for all my CICS classes, whatever they are named. So that would be apply to all object class names. Or you could say apply to all object resource names if there's multiple resource names. If you want to assert something for all Unix files or for all data sets, you can. Next, a piece about zSSC interfacing. So the zSSC Security and Compliance Center writes those new SMF 1154 SMF records. The zSecure audit has always supported all the security relevant records, but the amount of new fields was so enormous with the SMF 1154 records because they are all security relevant. Yeah, now in the SSE we get a bunch. So this is the second batch of SMF field names, you could say. So the first one was already in the previous release. So this is the second batch with more than 500 new field names. They all start with SMF 1154 underscore. So the logic is here that we try to use the same field name in Carla as it has in the mapping macro in the summer. So that's where all these names come. So typically they have 1154 underscore and then subtype. There's one exception that's for common sections, so especially for the protection of general resources, we have an S2 section, so that's section 2. Section 1 is the fixed information you will, and then there's a number of variable S2 resources, depending on the subject of the subtype, but they all have the same layout, all resources, or general resources protecting that area. So the subtypes are organized per component, if you will, in ZOS. But all components that call do SAF checks would have the general resource piece, the S2 piece here for the individual resources and their protection. So these are field names that could help you make reports. Other new stuff is that we have an option to limit it to the system the external security monitor, to the type you run on. So zSecure supports RACF, ACF2 a lot, top secret a bit. But if you're running on a specific system, you don't necessarily want to see all the options available to the other ESMs. It just makes things complex and maybe uses terms you have never heard of yet. So there's now the option here to limit it to the external security of the system you are actually executing the ISPF interface on. That will be pre-filled in. So it says, I did it on a RACF system, so it says limit to RACF menus and functions. And they are not bothered with all the other stuff for ACF2 and tip secret. Okay, that was the compliance piece. Next, we go to the access monitor. 3 new areas. So one of what the SSE provides is that we improve the performance in obtaining path names if you do the access monitor Unix extension. So you're collecting usage information for the Unix path names, how often security checks are done there, and for whom and for what file. We managed to kind of double the performance there. It's quite expensive to figure out what the path name is in a Unix call, because the Unix calls themselves do not contain the path name. They're always local within the current working directory. So we have to keep track of where we are in the directory tree, and then the path names in Access Monitor. Those path names are constructed and put in the Access Monitor file. So we have started caching some results, and actually we didn't only improve performance, but there were also a number of events where in the past the full path name was missing, where we now actually do know which path name it is. So by better keeping track of where we are, we know for sure that it was that path name. So we now put that in the Access Monitor record as well. Another enhancement request was the possibility to exclude now revoked user reads from the analysis, because yeah, if you compare behavior in the past with behavior now, if somebody managed to get his user ID revoked or he has since left the company, those user reads would be now revoked, and kind of make it difficult to find what really changed. So you now have the possibility to exclude those revoked user IDs. Another is to, actually an extension of the previous one, the possibility to customize the displays on basis of the simulated access property. So that's the current RACF database content. That was available for AM.1. It's now also available for AM.2. I'll show you some of these things. Here's the AM.1 selection for current database panel. So there now are at the bottom a number of checkboxes added where you can put a yes in front of them, or a no, or a blank. So if you put a yes in front of it, you would select an ID that's present or an ID that's revoked. If you put a no in front of it, you would exclude the IDs that are revoked. And you can also specifically look for special or operations or read-only auditor stuff, or exclude those from your analysis. If you just want to look at group authorities, I mean group permits, then you could exclude special operations, read-only auditor. And this panel is now also available under AM.2. So here's the AM.2 selection panel. Now has new checkbox, current RAC FTP selection. It used to be called simulated access on AM.1. It's now called current RAC FTP selection in both AM.1 and AM.2. So these are all long-standing RFEs. So AM.2 leads to the same panel if you take that current. So this looks remarkably like the AM.1 panel. You see the whole list of authorities that were instrumental. So that really is the simulation where we look at the current RACF database and look, if we look at the current RACF database, what exactly would have caused us to allow or to deny access. That's all those checkboxes are specific reasons. Finally, we have zSecure alert enhancement. A new alert has been added for master key ceremony, or however you want to call it. A new master key promotion is detected and now has its own alert. Another enhancement request from years ago already, but we finally got around to building it. Helped, of course, by the SMF record that ICSF puts out nowadays to detail exactly what kind of master key promotion happened. There's also a new, in the SSE, a new functionality for command verifier. Of course, that has a different APAR number. Namely, the policy that a phrase is required. So people are increasingly implementing the change from password to phrases because 8-character passwords are no longer safe enough according to number of standards. So then you have to enforce that that you use the phrase. So you can say, I want, if you add a new user ID, I want to enforce people to start adding a phrase. And specifically, so if you want to prevent people from logging on with an 8-character password, you have to forbid that they log on with a password. So phrase-only IDs. So we did have policies for password, and the default value policy where you could say, okay, if people have not specified a password, I still want to create a password, but make it a random password, using all the character types allowed with the rules. Now we have something similar for phrase, so that we now have the option to force the phrase. And then we automatically assign the 64-character random phrase. And we never put it in messages, so we have tried to make it a little bit more secure for the phrases. So in summary, that's the extent of the SSE that's about to come out. I'll give you the list of enhancement requests, or ideas as they are called nowadays. I didn't talk yet about the first one. So there's now one that says, it used to say nothing selected as an error message, and customers found that confusing. They thought, oh, did I do something wrong? Should I have typed something? They didn't realize that we had run through the RACF database and not found any records. So zSecure was so fast, they thought they had made an error in the query rather than that the query had been executed. So we finally now say that no records found, which is much clearer that we actually did do a search and are not just complaining about the content of the selection panel. We talked about the second and the third one, the fourth one. yeah, we talked about 359 about extending the scope of the assertion. We didn't talk yet about 339. So there's now we ship in a sample to morph data into an XML format. It's not that much use to the general user. You can use an example on how you could do it. It is an XML format that the US government likes to see. But I don't think anybody else has the applications to actually consume it in that way. So, but it's maintained by IBM now. And then we have the bottom one, we saw that alert. So that's what I had to share. And I'm open for questions. Let me go back to the...
Thank you, Hans. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? You can unmute your line if you want to ask your question live to Hans, or you can post it in the chat if you like.
I hope I didn't put everybody to sleep with
no, I think you've dazzled it.
syntax.
There's a lot of great enhancements there in that SSE, Hans. There really is. It's quite interesting actually to see the compliance testing, how that's evolved. It's been a while since I looked at it actually, but it looks very rich with things now. So well done to you and the team on that.
That's one thing I wanted to mention actually, the version 6 support. So the version 6 support in a subsequent version will drop the version 6, but instead support the new 8.10 or 8.11 or 8.12. That's become the standard by then. The version 6 is only there to make sure you can compare to your older stuff, the older version 6 related names, and compare with auditing programs you might have doing the version 6 stuff. So we'll drop that in the vNext for zSecure.
So did I hear you correctly saying so Stigs are still releasing? Is it every quarter they're doing an update?
Yes.
Okay. Are they sort of like major updates, some of these things that are coming through, or from their standpoint? Or is it just
well,
sort of tweaks?
I mean, they have this email ID. They have an email ID where you can drop comments. So there's a constant stream of comments they get in with requests to change the stick in certain ways.
Oh, okay.
Then they reject about half of them.
Yeah.
And then if it came from us, then we have to try to reformulate or get into a discussion on the topic. And sometimes it's embarrassing to say they point to a section in the IBM manual says, well, the IBM manual says this here and there for this component. Then we have to go to the development group to get their manual changed. So that these are the stick writers don't think they're the right. Yeah, they think they're doing the right thing by doing exactly what the IBM manual says. Sometimes the IBM manual is out of date. That's the point, and then we have to get that changed. So, and that takes a year, you know, and then after a year, finally, we can get the stick changed. So, long breath needed.
Indeed, indeed. And the other thing I picked up on was about the that option to limit to RACF menus if you're working like in a multi-ESM environment. So did you say that, like, for example, if I was working on an ACF2 system and I had both RACF and ACF2 products, would that then dynamically switch to, I could limit to ACF2 menus?
Yes. So
okay.
it basically says limited to the ESM of the system you are running on.
Okay.
That's what it does. I
wish I had that a few months ago with a site that I was working on, because we had both security systems, and it was a very frustrating. It's just not for me so much, but for some of the other users of the system, accidentally going into AA. You know,
yeah,
for ACF2.
I mean, and the problem becomes more prevalent because the zSSC you get entitled through all three ESMs nowadays. So that's where it becomes more. So if people upgrade from zSecure audit for RACF to zSSC, they suddenly get ACF2 manual options.
Indeed.
And that's so. This new option is to help you get more the display you were used to.
Yeah. It's great. So just another opportunity, everybody. Any questions from anybody? Like I say, you can unmute your line. Don't be afraid to speak up. We don't bite here. Or like I said, post your question in the chat. We still have a few minutes left. So what I was just waiting for, if anybody wants to post a question. So Hans, the route then to raising enhancement requests, because you said I always remember it as RFE, so it's now called ideas, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big
Okay.
blue.
Big blue. Okay.
ID something. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's great. So yeah, folks, for the purpose of feedback, this is session 7C, sorry. Let me just post that in the chat so that you can click on that directly. Let's do that. So I can do this. So yeah, there it is in the chat. Now, if you click on that link, that will take you through to the feedback. And just a quick recap on that. Of course, it's very important for the presenters and also for us at GSE, you know, that you do provide that. But for those of you who are collecting CPE or CPD points for attending these sessions, that then will magically appear on your GSE certificate, CPE certificate that you can download from My GSE. So Hans, big thank you again for coming to GSE to present to us. There's some really great features, and nice to see how zSecure is evolving over the years.
I missed the English beer, Jamie.
Yeah, well, you can always come to the GSE conference in November. There's plenty of beer there.
Yeah, but November is always, I'm on the orchestra
I know,
tour,
it's a bit of a clash, isn't it, with your, yeah. Well, sure we'll find an excuse to get you over. We've got our, actually, it's a good reminder, Hans. So we are having our summer security working group meeting. So for those of you that have been with GSE for a long time, particularly on the security stream, you know that we run 2 working group meetings a year. One typically is in February, and the next one is sort of in the sort of June timeframe. But because we've got the virtual conference this year in February, we're not doing a working group meeting until June. So our working group meeting this year is on Thursday, the 29th of June, and that's going to be a hybrid meeting. So this is our first time back together as a working group. We've been holding them virtually for the last 3 years. So Hans, there's an excuse for you to come across now to the UK and do a presentation for us and have some beers. We're just firming up at the moment the venue for that, but we will let you know. But it's announced on our GSE website, and you'll see some social media around that just to basically save the date. So if you are interested in presenting for that, so we've basically got blank canvas now with regards to that day. So if you are interested in doing a presentation, do drop me an email about that with just a session title and synopsis so that we can see what you'd like to talk about, and then we'll do our best to get you scheduled. And Hans, for sure, we'll have you over for that. So we'll keep everybody posted on it. So yeah, big thank you, Hans, once again. Round of applause, virtual round of applause. Just as an FYI, so after this session, there is a 60-minute break. So we're breaking for lunch here. So that's from 1 o'clock till 2 o'clock UK time. But there is a lunch and learn session going on that starts at 1:10. That's with Broadcom. If you're interested in that, just go to the agenda. You'll see it. But for the rest of us, we'll be taking an hour break, and then we're back here in the security stream at 2 o'clock UK time with Maintegrity. So that's going to be presented by Al Surrett, who's going to be talking to us about ransomware recovery. So if you can join us for that. And then after Al's session later in the afternoon, we've got Mark Nelson joining us from IBM RACF development team to give us a RACF update. And just a bit further afield than that, there's a keynote session at the end of the day at 5 o'clock UK time till 6. There's plenty going on today. And as ever, there's other streams running. As I mentioned, at the beginning of the day, there are some security sessions that are actually running in other tracks. So, for example, on the 101, 102 streams, also for like Kix, for example, they're doing a Kix security update over the next 3 days. So there's plenty to choose from. So yes, thank you very much. Thanks once again, Hans. Thanks, Mike Zagorski. I know you're on the line as well. And we'll see you later on this afternoon. And Hans, we'll see you very soon. Thank you.